Some videos are going to have a narrow range of appeal. I think this will be one of those. Hello, welcome to my channel. My name is Greg, and I'm doing a response video to two other videos. One is DAW the Greatest Publisher of All Time? A deep dive into the history of DAW books by Pulp Mortem. That was followed up by the Unofficial Show Us Your DAWs tag by Jeff's Cave of Cool Books. And if you do not know already, DAW was a science fiction publisher from mostly the 70s and 80s. They do have a longer period of publishing, but 70s and 80s, that was their time. The DAW books with the yellow spines for everyone who grew up reading science fiction in that era. And I am a DAW reader, or should I say, I really was a DAW reader back when I was in high school. I sort of fell off reading the DAW science fiction books as I grew older, but then I became an adult and I started looking back for those yellow-spined DAW books, and I now have a bunch of them. So I'm going to do this sort of unofficial tag, and I'm going to show you some of my DAW books. I don't have an extensive collection of authors. Really, I have one big author that I'll show you right away, and another author that I'm going to save to the end because he's kind of embarrassing to have on my list. So let me show you my DAW books. I'm going to start off with Alan Burt Akers, Transit to Scorpio. Alan Burt Akers is the pen name for the British author Kenneth Bulmore. He wrote a lot of pulpy adventure and science fiction novels from the 70s and the 80s. And this series is essentially a knockoff of Edgar Rice Burroughs' Mars series. In this series, a British man, I think he's from the 16th or 17th century. He is in the Navy. He is a fantastic swordsman. And one day he is brought to this alien planet named Antares in the constellation of Scorpio. He is brought there by a race of advanced aliens to do their bidding. And they essentially make him immortal in the fact that he cannot die from old age, although he could die from battle wounds if they were serious enough. So this British man goes to this distant planet. He falls in love with a beautiful native woman who's essentially just a human being on another planet, and he has a lot of adventures. I read the first 6 or 7 books when I was in high school. I kind of liked them, but once I hit university, I just dropped off reading them. And when I was in my 40s, I picked it up again and read the first 4 books, and I collected a whole bunch of these DAW books in this series, and you'll see them all in just a moment. I never got past book 4 or 5, but maybe I should start reading them again, just to have some entertaining science fiction adventure stories. So this is book 1, Transit to Scorpio. Book 2, The Sons of Scorpio. Book 3, Warrior of Scorpio. Book 4, Sword Ships of Scorpio. I'm going to stop naming the numbers because I'm going to make it up. I'm going to mess up sooner or later. Prince of Scorpio. Manhounds of Antares. Now you will notice that all the previous books ended in Scorpio, and the next series of books will be Antares, and these are called cycles. There is a larger overarching story in the first Scorpio books, and then there is a larger overarching storyline in these Antares books. Arena of Antares. Flyers of Antares. And I'm pretty sure this is where I dropped off reading in high school. Bladesmen of Antares. Armada of Antares. Adventure of Antares. The Tides of Cregan. Now, Cregan is the local planet name where this character, Grace Prescott, finds himself. So this is another cycle in a larger story. Renegade of Cregan. Corazar of Cregan. Now, Corazar is again a local name for warrior in this planet of Antares. Secret Scorpio. You notice that Scorpio is back again, which means this is another cycle in a larger storyline. Savage Scorpio. Captive Scorpio. Golden Scorpio. A Life for Cregan. Now, if you notice carefully, Alan Burt Akers is no longer the attributed author. It is Dre Prescott. Dre Prescott is the main character in all of these stories, and it's narrated from the first person. And this is another case where the books are being published by the character as the author in sort of this tradition of Nick Carter or Hank Janssen. A Swordship for Cregan. A Fortune for Cregan. A Victory for Cregan. Beasts of Antares. Another new cycle. And yes, he does cycle through these Antares, Scorpios, Cregans at will. They'll just know it's a new cycle because of the number of the books that are in there. A Rebel for Antares. Legions of Antares. Allies of Antares. Mazes of Scorpio, yet another new cycle. Della of Vila. Now, Della is Dre Prescott's Lady Love. She is featured as a main character, or a secondary character in many of the novels. She's often not there a lot because Dre Prescott's out fighting the bad guys and wizards and monsters. Oh, they're not really kind of wizards. They're just sort of like semi-scientists. But this one, if I'm not mistaken, is actually a book narrated by Dre Prescott's wife. Fires of Scorpio. Talons of Scorpio. Masks of Scorpio. Seg the Bowman. Seg the Bowman is Dre Prescott's best buddy on this distant planet. And again, if I'm not mistaken, this is a book narrated by that character. Werewolves of Cregan. Witches of Cregan. Storm over Vila. This might be another story narrated by Dre Prescott's wife. Omens of Cregan. And that's all the Dre Prescott books that I have from DAW. If you are following closely and know this series very well, you will notice that I'm missing Warlord of Cregan, or Antares. That is the final book published by DAW in this series. I don't have it. I guess it was not all too popular, but it was a very popular series in Germany, and Kenneth Bulmer continued to publish the Dre Prescott books in Germany, and of course they were translated from English into German. In German, I do not believe they were ever published in English in a physical format. Recently, however, I think a publisher has brought those old books that are originally published in German available in ebook. I don't have any of those. And those are all the Dre Prescott books that I have. I do have some other DAW books, though. Lynn Carter, The Warrior of World's End. Lynn Carter was a pulp writer. He was a little bit after Robert E. Howard, and Lynn Carter sort of wanted to be the legacy of Robert E. Howard. Lynn Carter's books aren't as good as Robert E. Howard, although Lynn Carter did go on to publish some Conan stories and transform some of Robert E. Howard's other stories about other characters into Conan stories. Lynn Carter, I have a bunch of his books, but I actually have not read a lot of his books. And if you ask myself, why do I have a lot of Lynn Carter books if I've never read them? It cost me 99 cents. And it's got the beautiful DAW yellow spine. And how can I say no to that? I believe this is another sort of fantasy epic that Lynn Carter wrote, but I've never read any in this series. Enchanter of World's End, the second book in this series. The Immortal of World's End. The Barbarian of World's End. The Pirate of World's End. And here is a new Lynn Carter series. This is known as the Green Star series. And this is Lynn Carter repeating what Edgar Rice Burroughs did with his Mars books about having a man transplanted into another world. Alan Burt Akers, of course, did it with Gray Prescott. If I'm not mistaken, this one, a man gets transferred into another world, sort of in a dream state, inhabits a new body. I'm not entirely sure. I just collected these because, what was this? 65 cents. And I bought this a while ago. When the Green Star Calls. By the light of the green star. As the green star rises, in the glow of the green star. And those are my Lynn Carter books. Now, when I was growing up in high school, my favorite author was Michael Moorcock, and I had a S-ton of Michael Moorcock books. Almost all of them published in the DAW yellow paperbacks. For whatever reason, after I hit college, I got rid of them all. Stupid mistake. But I still have some in the Michael Moorcock series. I have the Hawkmoon books. This is The Jewel in the Skull, the Mad God's Amulet. And for whatever reason, this is an edition when DAW started publishing different colors and not the yellow spine. The Sword of Dawn. You have a buck-naked man with a sword fighting some sort of tentacled lizard. And then you have the Rune Staff. And those are the 4 Michael Moorcock books in the Hawkmoon series that I own in my DAW edition. If I ever see DAW editions of any other Michael Moorcock books, I'm going to buy them. Another author that I started reading in high school was Kenneth Lee. She wrote a series of fantasy books on what is known as the Flat Earth. This is the first in the series, known as Knight's Master. And in the subtitle, if you look very, very carefully, it's called an adult fantasy. I recently read this a few years ago. Her status of calling it an adult fantasy is not up to snuff about what we would call an adult fantasy. But way back in the 70s, when I think this was first published, was this first published in the 70s? Yes, 1978. I guess it would have been considered adult material. Death's Master. This is the book that I remember really liking when I read it in high school. Delusion's Master. Again, an adult fantasy. Delirium's Mistress. At least she changed it up from master to mistress. And the last one is Knight's Sorceress. Tales from the Flat Earth. Dark Over Landfall by Marion Zimmer Bradley. This is a fantasy novel originally published in 1972. There are a bunch of books in this series. This is the only one that I own. Marion Zimmer Bradley has fallen from favor since I was growing up. She used to be considered one of the top fantasy authors. But let us just say she got involved in a sex scandal involving her husband and their daughter, and things did not go well after that. Here is some science fiction. This is Down Below Station by C.J. Cherryh. This is one of the newer editions of DAW Books. It no longer has the yellow spine. This is sort of space opera science fiction. The Faded Sun trilogy by C.J. Cherryh. These are science fiction novels published in the late 70s. And again, this is one of the more modern DAW books. I have the DAW Science Fiction Reader, originally published in 1976. This was the 200th DAW book published. It is a collection of short stories and at least one novella by Alan Burt Akers in the Dre Prescott series. I think this may be a collectible book, according to some people, but I recently got it in the past year or two for only $1. Last, and probably least, is an author that I'm a little bit embarrassed to have on my shelf. But back in the 80s, when I was attending a science fiction convention, there was a panel of authors or critics, and one of these critics got up and said disparaging remarks about how much DAW loved this author. And of course, if you know your DAW history in science fiction, you know I am talking about the notorious Gore series by John Norman. This used to be a really epic and good Sword and Planet adventure series back in the first 6 books. And then something happened to John Norman when he started to think that women actually wanted to be sexual slaves to men, and the series took a nosedive. This book is in the nosedive part of the series. This one is The Fighting Slave of Gore. In this trilogy that I'm going to show you, John Norman brought in a new character into the series to narrate. I don't remember the character's name. I did read this in high school because dumb boys always think it's going to change, and this was close to the one of the books that I read last back when I was in high school. Rogue of Gore. Guardsmen of Gore. Savages of Gore. Blood Brothers of Gore. Players of Gore. Mercenaries of Gore. Renegades of Gore. Vagabonds of Gore. And Magicians of Gore. This was the last in the Gore series for a very long time. I guess something happened to the publishers in DAW. They lost their love affair with John Norman and they stopped publishing this series. And this was sometime in the 80s. But in the aughts, John Norman started republishing new books in this series, and he's mostly self-published now. And this was, book 25? I think he's published like 10 or 15 more books, and he's still going. He must be in his 80s or maybe even his 90s. I have not read any of his newer books, but I presume they're mostly still this women love to be slaves claptrap. And I may try one day just to see if they've changed and gone back to the old series when they were good. But I don't think so. I may not do that. Okay, those are all my DAW books, science fiction and fantasy. I really did love this publisher back in the 80s when I was in high school. And again, as I say, I fell from favor once I hit university, and I was told that reading this kind of science fiction wasn't literary enough. I think those college professors did me a disservice. Maybe not about John Norman, but at least the others were good enough. Thank you for watching, and keep on reading classic DAW science fiction and fantasy books.